So thank you very much, Peter. I'd like to thank Nikon and Beko for this opportunity to show some of my work and talk about photography. Like he said, I grew up with photography. My dad is a photographer, so I traveled at an early age around Iceland, both flying in a small plane, changing film in the back of the plane for my dad, and then we also went on trips. My dad is quite the salesman, so we went on countless trips selling tons of his aerial obliques of Iceland that you, as soon as you leave Reykjavík and you go into a gas station or into someone's home, there's a really good chance of seeing some of his aerial shots. And that was really nice to grow up with that, to have that possibility to start to get to know Iceland as a young boy. And it is also a big part of my drive today. What I love to do is to travel and to photograph. My dad was also quite disciplined in making family albums, especially after we had some trips abroad or in Iceland. And I used to spend a lot of time, often when I came home from school, and make a nice cocoa and some biscuits, and then go through these albums and relive all those moments. So photography for me is not just a profession, it's just a very big part of who I am. Are we going to dim the lights a little bit, or? Because I think it will influence the quality of the pictures a bit. What I wanted to start to show you, just to give you a bit of an idea of how I work, I do a lot of my own photography that is just purely for me, stuff that I shoot that I don't really intend to show anyone, in that sense, that are just for me. And this particular place is an island in Breiðafjörður Bay, Flatey. This island I've visited numerous times, and when I first came there, I was really focused on the houses that are there. There are a lot of really nice old houses. But then when you come again and again to a place, you start to notice other things. And Flatey has become a place where I basically am free to do whatever I want to do. And I often go there only with one camera and one lens, or just a few lenses, sometimes with loads of stuff, sometimes very limited, and just to play around. And I just wanted to show you a few of images from Flatey that kind of like describe the place as I see it. In Flatey, there are 2 families living there. They make a living of catching fish and growing sheep. Like I said, there are a lot of houses there. This is one of the houses reflected in the ocean there. This house is called Vogur. And we often rent this. I go there with a bunch of friends. We're up to 60 people going every year with our kids and spending a long weekend there. So this is the kind of stuff I'm shooting just to have fun, just to experiment. In this particular case, I had just acquired the Nikon 35 1.4G lens, which is a really nice lens to shoot wide open, has a nice character, and I was just playing around with different subjects. The 85 also is an incredibly nice lens, and it begs you to shoot it wide open. Typically, traditionally shooting landscapes, you're shooting with a smaller part, you're having a lot of depth of field, but it's also nice to play around with shallower depth of field. This is a very descriptive image from Flatey for me. Those are the pants of my son Ari. Takes him about 15 minutes after we get to the island to get completely soaked with dirt or water. Like I mentioned, the sheep, they are grazing there in a particular area, and it's actually fenced off where the church is. So those 2 lambs are just grazing, and we're just playing around close to the church. All of the houses have different names in Flatey. This dates back to when Flatey was really the cradle of culture in the 19th century. This was the place to be, both trade-wise and also for cultural activities. Kind of like this shot of my friend Hlynur taking a photograph. This guy is very big with big hands and uses a very small camera, as you can see. I tease him about this fact. My son running around in the evening sun. More details shot with the 35. Of course, there are a lot of birds there as well. This eider duck was nesting close to the house. You could get really close to it. It didn't move off the eggs. This is shot with the 85 wide open, so I'm really close to it. Another good example of the quality of the 35. More of similar stuff. So this is kind of my sketchbook. This is what I do just to get to know the gear, play around with different compositions, and just capturing something that, like this furniture here, is just something that is really kitsch, but I like it. Here we have one of the few campers that are on this island. As you can see, it's securely fastened with chains. It can blow quite hard in Iceland. What I like about this image is they have the same color of the blinds as in the sky, and it's almost symmetrical, but not completely. I find when I shoot something that's 100% symmetrical, it kind of isn't interesting, but as soon as you have something that's slightly off, the image hits better. So this is a typical situation for me in flight day. Everybody has gone to sleep, I'm still out shooting, because we're always there very late May or early June, and I tend to stay awake until 2 or 3 and then sleep in, because this is the magic light. And this is as dark as it gets in this time of year. So all that playing around is not just fun, it's also very important for us photographers to practice and get to know our gear and shoot. So when something big happens, like one volcanic eruption, you're ready and you know how to use the gear and you know the gear inside out. I've used this maybe as an excuse often for buying new stuff, that it pushes me to do and develop as a photographer. And of course, a certain part of it is true, but I really know when I buy a new lens and I go out and shoot with it, it really gives you a boost to really play around with it. Here are a few images from the volcanic eruptions in 2010. I think this is some of my best work actually, so I really wanted to include it. This particular shot is probably one of the first frames I took. I was lucky enough to get a ride on a helicopter and just do a quick flight from Rangá, where they were based, and this was basically the first day when the clouds opened up a little bit and you could see something. And this image has been sold numerous times, even though at the time I didn't think when I edited that this was the strongest image, but it's been the biggest seller from the eruption. This particular one also has sold quite well. I was actually standing on a ridge shooting the details of the eruption. It was quite, this first eruption, Fimmvörðuháls, was really easy. It was nice, it was accessible, wasn't too dangerous to be very close to it, so you could actually shoot it from a lot of different angles. I saw this plane flying and I was trying to shoot it, but it was hopeless. I kept on shooting just the eruption and it basically flew into the frame, and I just fired off a few shots and I got it. And it's nice because the plane is kind of like old looking. I think it's some kind of Russian type. So I think it also adds something to the image. Here's another shot that begs for being viewed really large. It's a big overview. You can see the people on the right-hand upper corner on the ridge. A few days later into this eruption, another rift opened up between where you can see the volcano going off and the people. And there were actually some scientists walking close by it, but unfortunately nobody got hurt. This shot is the one that's been stolen the most for me. I've seen this on a lot of different websites and even in publications in Iceland and abroad. And often when I call up people and say, "Hi, I noticed you're using my image, don't recall selling it to you. Can I send you an invoice?" And they go, "Oh, we just Googled volcano Iceland and this was on page 1. Can't we use it?" So it's a part of us, for us photographers, is to educate people about copyright. And I've never had any issues. It's just you have to be firm, but not obnoxious when you call people up and try to educate them about copyright. A few more images. This is looking down towards where that lava was flowing down the gorge. It's like the gates of hell, basically. Kind of like this shot, it's taken from the back side of the crater. Really simple composition, only 3 colors. This shows you how close you can get to the border of the lava. I'm not sure if it's visible here, but there are actually tire tracks that leads underneath the lava. There were actually cars driving there just a few hours before. So this was Fimmvörðuháls. The next one that happened later was Eyjafjallajökull, the one that nobody can say if it's not a native Icelander. I missed the start of that eruption, so I got in pretty late shooting it. This particular frame is shot on a trip I did with Daniel, an employer of Beko. He's also a pilot. So Daniel and I and a friend of mine, we went out from Reykjavík flying, and when we got to the eruption site, it kind of looked like this. It was nice. We had Omar Ragnarsson flying there with a Swiss TV crew on a plane, nice for scale. But this wasn't really the image that I wanted to had pre-visualized. I wanted twilight, so I told Daniel that we should land and wait it out, and we did that. And when we took off again, I was a bit stressed that we were going too late. The light was dropping really fast, so I was a bit stressed, maybe because we had a maybe 50-minute flight from where we landed towards the eruption site again. But we managed to catch this, and this is shot on the D3X 6400 ISO, the 51.4G at f2, 125th of a second. I couldn't really believe it when I was chimping in the plane. You do a flyby, you shoot it, and then you turn around, and then you check your exposure, check your sharpness. And I couldn't really believe the quality I was getting. And then the light kept dropping, so I switched over to D3S. This is shot on 25,600 ISO. With 7200 with a vibration reduction. I think the shutter speed is 250th of a second. And it's not just sharp and okay, it's clean enough. I've sold this for a full page usage. Then I kept on shooting the eruptions, and now I wanted to focus on the affected areas. This is from a trip I went with Árni, my friend, who's also here today. This is early morning. It's funny, we spent money on a hotel room that we used for maybe 2 hours in Kolsvöllur. We went really early and got this. This is nice where the plume is blocking the sunlight to a certain point. Here's another friend of mine, Andre. We went into the asphalt, and it was quite eerie to be in an area that was, at this time, it was closed off for traffic unless you had a reason to be there. And I was shooting on assignment for Der Spiegel. And so we got to drive in there. It was just really eerie just to hear the volcano in the distance, and then just birds chirping. There was no traffic, nothing. As you can see, you need to wear the mask, and you wear that also inside the Land Rover, because it doesn't really make any difference. Here you see also how this is actually at the border of the asphalt in Seljaland, but it's still that dark enough that the headlights of the Land Rover, which are not strong, are actually illuminating the road. Here's another from Sólheimajökull Glacier. So the top part of this is usually pitch, no, it's actually white, but there it's kind of like almost pitch black or really dirty from all the ash. We went down to the beach to photograph this. So it's not a cloud in the sky, it's the ash cloud that's blowing eastwards. And what was interesting is it was actually a nice and bright day, but when you're underneath the ash, the light is really different, and it was quite interesting to photograph. This overview shot of the little town of Vík really shows how all the colors were muted, how the ash was blowing around. And this is shot from the road that leads up to this mountain, Reynisfjall. From there, I then got to shoot this in that really strange kind of light. And this particular shot is one of my favorites, actually. There are many that need a few moments to figure out where it's shot. You start to see those sea stacks, Reynistrangar, And then you figure out, oh, the beach should be black, but it's ash that's covering it, so it looks like a foreign beach. I do quite some guiding. Since 2010, I've been doing guiding, and then guiding other photographers to do landscape photography in Iceland, both private and then group trips. And it's funny when you get people to Iceland, they more or less today show up with a bucket list of images they've seen online. And nobody has really explained to them that in Iceland, the weather is often, or most often, not really playing along with what you want to do. So it's always a big part of my job to kind of like get people to understand that they have to have a realistic expectations of what we are able to do. Ice caves are really popular these days. I remember when I started guiding, you could hire a guide for an ice cave for half a day for 4 people, no problem. Today, if you don't book a year and a half in advance, you don't get a spot. It's just silly. But it's nice with the contrast in Iceland. You have the cool and you have the hot, the warm. This is the hills of Kerlingafjall. Also important to show here. This you have a person in the frame is really important, just to give you scale and also to add on to the composition. See a lot of that in Lucas's work, where he has a lot of landscape and a small person. This has become very popular in the last years, to shoot with a really strong ND filter, 10-stop filter or 6-stop, get a lot of movement in the water. And again, contrast between colors. Snæfellsnes Peninsula on the left and Rauðifossar on the right. Stokksnes is one of those places that everybody wants to shoot. Everybody has images, and none of them look like this. They all have this perfect evening glow on the peaks. Nevertheless, this is my favorite kind of light there. Muted colors. Here we have a beautiful place, Aldeyrfoss waterfall. Typically when I shoot glacial water, I don't want to shoot it for such a long exposure time to get it too smooth, because it kind of lies. But here it adds drama to this, where you have the really smooth, silky smooth water and then the columnar basalt around. And also the long, it's like a 50-second exposure. Gives you small streaks in the clouds that also build up the composition. I'm a sucker for roads and leading lines from roads. So this kind of stuff, when I go through my archive, I see it reoccurring. The Glacial Lagoon is one of those areas that everybody wants to go to. I put this image in just to remind me of how important it is to be patient when you're shooting. I had spent 3 days in this area with a couple of clients. We had really horrible light, basically too bright in the day, and then it always clouded up in the evening and we didn't get anything. And they were about to pack up and leave when I said, let's wait a while, because sometimes the glacier makes these breaks in the clouds and the sun is setting almost behind the glacier. And this happened. We had this light for 5 to 10 minutes. So here's also a shot that I did in, I think it was last September, on a trip with kids from Medieskolerne. Again, horrible weather. And often I find horrible weather is very liberating for me as a landscape photographer, because it relieves the pressure. When I show up at a place where the conditions are perfect, I get stressed, because I really have to capture that shot. So often horrible weather or changing light is really nice, because it kind of like frees you up to do things differently. Here you have 2 different ways of shooting waterfalls. So on the right we have the 500px method, which is show up at the perfect time, do a long exposure and then crank up the color a bit. And on the left you have another method, which is go as close as you possibly can with a 35 and shoot wide open to capture the power of it. This is Dettifoss, the most powerful waterfall in Europe. And I'm literally getting splashed by it there. Maybe not such a good idea, but it's a nice shot. Often when I'm traveling with these clients, I tell them that I tell this mantra just to get them in the mindset that if I come back after each day with a one image I'm prepared to show other people that I'm proud enough of, that's a successful day, just one. And for this particular day, this was basically the only image I made. Probably frame number 3 on the card, and then it was just sleet and snow the whole day, and you couldn't really shoot anything. Here's a shot I put in because it really displays the quality of the D800. This is D800E, D800E. Single frame. I mean, it's not multiple exposure. The dynamic range in this shot is really huge, and the trick is to expose to the right, expose as much as you can without blowing the highlights, and then you can pull off those shadows. The black in the right lower corner is when you pull up the frame in the software, there's nothing there. But it's just amazing what you can take out from these shadows from the Nikon cameras. This is close to Stocksness, the image I showed you before. Here's an example of me getting a new lens, playing around with doing something different. Another one from Jökulsárlón, and this is really nice when nature cooperates with you and the birds sit still on this iceberg for 1.5 minutes, because you really want to get the reflection. It was not completely still, so there were small riplets, and then you do a really long exposure. And it's really nice to have the birds as a scale, so they were kind enough to stay there for long enough. This is shot on a trip I did with Peter and one client. Peter and I went down there to scout this location and shot this, and the client didn't think it was worth it going down there, but we were quite happy with this. Here's one from the interior again. This is shot midday. The light should be really, really harsh, but the ash from the 2010 eruption was blowing around, so it's kind of like diffusing the light. So I'm fond of moods. I'm fond of different the sudden light changes and the drama has always attracted me. This is from the Landmannalaugar area in the interior, shot in October, if I remember correctly. More contrasts. Selfoss waterfall at sunset in the summer. Moment after I shot this, I turned around, there were 10 Russians waiting to get my spot. This is the reality of the landscape photographer in Iceland today. I mean, it's really strange to think back. There's only a few years, maybe 5-6 years ago, if you showed up at locations and you were shooting sunrises or sunsets in the summer when it's really late or really early, you usually were alone, but now, not a chance. Here's one I put in just to remind me again that you always go out and shoot. This is in January, it was shitty weather, my clients went out to shoot, and I was sitting in my Land Rover and it was almost as wet inside the car as outside. So I decided to go out and I made this image. I had to spot out a lot of the droplets in the sky, but it has mood to it. Last autumn, I made a trip into Landmannalaugar area, and there's this one day a year they go and herd up the sheep there, and then you're allowed to drive further than just Landmannalaugar. You're allowed to drive into this canyon called Jökulgil, and this year I made that trip for the first time, and I was lucky enough to have a client that was really fit. He was actually in much better shape than I am, so we walked out, hiked out everywhere, and when we got to the car, everybody had left, all the farmers and all the sheep and everything, and we were driving back almost in darkness, but it was a lot of fun. So just a few other types of images. The snow. This is a location I've revisited probably 10 times. I'm never getting the light that I want to get there. You have to get the last rays of sun in this foreground, you have to be there almost at the peak of the longest day of the year. I've once been there around the 20th of June, but we had a bloody cloud move in just before. Later on that summer, when I was there in probably late July, I was basically losing the sun on the foreground. It was still on the sea stacks, but I was losing on the foreground. And this is from an inspiration of a picture of a good friend of mine and a co-guide, Daniel Bergman, which is a fantastic photographer. He has a really nice image from this place. I met Daniel when I shot this last summer. This is the super moon we had last summer. Hiked up to Bláhnjúkur to shoot this. And on my way, I met Daniel and his crew. One more of those sea stacks. This I find very interesting, how the moss grows kind of like in these lines. Seems to be that in those parts the earth can hold more water, so the moss starts to grow like this. Winter scene from Skaftafell, Svartifoss, and then detail from the Green Ridge. This is shot on the same day I went into the highlands where I shot that pictures of the sheep on the ridge there. Horses. Haven't really done much horse photography. I really have to because most of my clients really love them. I have a similar relationship with horse photography and Northern Lights. I think it's nice, but it's not really my cup of tea. I mean, it's maybe now since I'm starting to ride more horses, I'll get more into it. I mean, they're beautiful creatures, but it's with animals, wildlife, especially birds. You really have to know a bird if you want to do a good photo of a bird. I mean, Christ, I have thousands of images of puffins that are just horrendous. Maybe one usable. Kerlingarfjöll in the interior. This is actually me, probably 40 pounds ago. But I made it down there. I was alone and I needed something for scale, so I put the camera on timed release and ran down there. This is in River Skjálfandafljót, Geitafoss, that's below Goðafoss, the waterfall of the gods. The image that everybody shows up with, wanna shoot that. This is from Syðra Fjallabak, which is a magnificent drive, especially in the summer nights. To drive, get this kind of light is just otherworldly. Put in this one because I think it's a funny shot. It was a really fun job. It was a installation made by Bjarkey Ólafsdóttir, which is an artist. It was something that 350.org orchestrated all around the world got artists to make environmental art that would raise awareness about global warming, etc. And she got this idea to draw this huge polar bear onto Langjökull Glacier, and it was drawn with red food dye, organic, of course. So no glacier was harmed during this installation. Here we have a shot of our friend Andrew Hancock. This is from this winter. So he came and spent a few days with me. It was a lot of fun. Of course, guys talking gear and experimenting stuff. It's always nice. And here we have a shot from Hraunfossar, the lava falls. Definitely a fall shoot. I mean, you get those lights in the foliage, these colors, I mean, and it makes a nice contrast with the blue in the water. It's really incredible in some rivers, the turquoise or the blue color you get in the rivers. I think it has something to do with all the oxygen that's being processed when it's flowing in these particular flows. And sometimes when you come to a place like Jökulsárlón, this awaits you. It resembles the stuff that Lucas shoots. And I think there was somebody, not him, but somebody shooting something for a client. But this just waited when I stopped on the parking lot. This scene waited, and I just jumped out and shot it. So to use the words of Ansel Adams, sometimes I do get to the places just when God's ready to have somebody to click the shutter. That sums up my show for today. Thank you.